Everyone, welcome to JNUEE preparatory sessions. So my name is Anaga, and as you must be knowing, this session has been organized by Democratic Students Federation, which is an independent left students organization, and I am an activist of the DSF. The session is specifically for students who would be appearing for MA in Political Science in the JNUEE Entrance Examinations 2021, which is to be held in the later part of this month. So to give you a brief, before the onset of the pandemic and the shutdown of universities, from the JNU Students Union, we used to conduct a lot of coaching and preparatory sessions for students who would be appearing in JNU entrance examinations inside the campus. That is, offline classes used to take place. But now, since with the pandemic and the online mode of education, we are not in a position to have such offline classes inside the campus. So from the Democratic Students Federation, we decided that we will be holding online preparatory sessions and to reach out to maximum students and aspirants who would be appearing for the JNUEE 2021 and help them in whatever ways we can. We understand, given the current online mode of education and the shutdown of universities, students are facing a lot of issues. From the DSF, we are trying to reach out to as much as people as possible and help in whatever ways we could. And so we'll try our best to make sure whatever materials and whatever classes that are being held are accessible for everybody. In case of any issues, you can reach out to any of us in the DSF or message us through our social media profiles as well. So other than that, today's session, as I told, will be specifically for students appearing for MA in Political Science. And to take the session, we have with us Vipanchika. So she is a first year MA Political Science student at the Center for Political Studies, JNU. So I think she'll be able to better guide you in your academic pursuit. So all the best to all of you, and I'll now request Vipanchika to take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Anaka. Please let me know if the presentation is visible.
Hi, it's visible now.
Okay. Hello, everybody. So, political science, MA Political Science is part of a center called Center for Political Studies. So in order to, so this entire presentation that I'm going to take, which is going to be very short because it's an introductory session, all right? And you basically will have to keep in mind that what I'm going to tell in this session is going to be about how reading for academics, reading political science for academics is different from studying it for entrances per se, okay? So in order for that, I have created I have made the entire gamut of political science into 4 parts. And the first part, where I thought all fitting together, is Western political thought, political theory, and Indian political thought. The second part is Indian government and politics and Indian polity. The third part is comparative politics, and the fourth, international relations. So, like I said, the question that this presentation is basically trying to answer is how to study. Okay, it's just a guide for you how to go about with your preparation, because a lot of students do not know how to do that, and that's one of the reasons why they score very less. Okay, the books that I would recommend for theory and thought, which I read myself, are these 3. For political theory, I read O.P. Gauba, An Introduction to Political Theory, and the book that I write for Western political thought is written by Shefali Jha, who is also a faculty member at Center for Political Studies. So it's likely that the questions might come from this book. And then there is O.P. Gauba's Indian Political Thought. While I do recommend these 3 books, it's not that you have to read these 3 books alone. You could have like other materials, maybe not this. But whatever that is, just go through them thoroughly. So let me just tell you how to read thought. I mean, how to make notes or anything for the sake of entrances. And the way you study thought would be, first, in the Western political thought, you basically study from Plato to Hannah Arendt. Read their works in the sense, what books did they write, what concepts do they have, or are there any famous quotes? Okay, an example that I gave is of Karl Marx here. While his books, like many of them are very popular, I just took for the sake of exemplifying here the Communist Manifesto. Okay, so while making notes, I would not just write Karl Marx Communist Manifesto, but I would also write some quotes which are important. One quote, which is that which I have included here, is "Workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose except the chains." And I would also write some additional facts in the sense, when was it written? Did he write it alone? So clearly, because Karl Marx did not write the book alone, it was with Frederick Engels, and he wrote it in 1848, right? So this way, I basically make the notes. However, since Communist Manifesto is a manifesto, very short book, not it's not a space for theoretical development or something. But his other books, for example, Das Kapital, it has is somebody putting messages? Because I cannot see them. If you have any, just unmute yourself, and if these are any questions related to the thing, you could ask me towards the end. Okay. um yeah, so I was telling how, if you're looking at the book Das Capital, then how you should be making notes is that there are some concepts which are given only in this book for the first time. For example, like commodity fetishism and class consciousness. Okay. So, these concepts. So when you are reading something, it's not that you just know what these terms mean, but also you should know where they are coming from, because the model that you are going to be writing now for the examination is going to be MCQs. So they're going to test the factual knowledge that you have. Okay, but it doesn't mean that you have to push aside the to understand what commodity fetishism is or class consciousness is, because all of these will also decide how you're going to answer the questions which do not directly shoot factual information. All right. So this is about Western political thought, and Indian political thought is basically that. You also use the very same method of making notes or reading in that way, where you read a person, what did he do, what books, what quotes, and what other information do you have, and that all includes from Kautilya to people who are doing, who have been having these, have been writing until the pre-independence time. Okay, so that's about thought. And if we go to political theory, this is where in theory you have many concepts. So the book that I referred to you is O.P. Gauba's Political Theory. But then if Opigawa's political theory is recommendable for the reason that it does not really talk simply about political theory, but it encompasses a lot many other things. Aspects of comparative politics is covered in it. Aspects of international relations is also covered, and a lot of Gandhi is also talked about in the midst, and which is also very helpful. However, if you are done with everything, if you have, since the exam is only 1 month, it's just in 1 month. So, if some of you who have already read and it's only political theory that you want to read, I'd suggest you go for Rajiv Bhargava's book, where in detail and also very lucidly everything is really well presented. For example, like so we have all these concepts in political theory, what justice is, equality is, rights is, or so many other things, right? So an example that I have given here is that of justice. Okay, so there are so many people who talk about justice. When you're reading political theory, you look at a concept and try to write down the names of people who talked about it, who have done like extensive research on it. Okay, so while there are many other people who talked about justice other than Rawls and Nozick, who are there on your screen, um, for example, like Sandel, Walzer, even Amartya Sen, I just took these two for example sake. And when I make notes, for example, I look at what did Rawls say, and then I also go and see if he has any criticisms. Clearly, the rest of the theories that you will be reading in justice are basically the criticisms to Rawls or Dworkin. Okay, so you have to make the notes in such a way that you get a greater understanding of the concept. And how do you do that is you look at the differences between each person's understanding of what they think is justice. Okay, Rawls, by just looking at that, we get an understanding that Rawls basically is giving us a procedural and distributive justice, whereas Nozick is giving us an entirely new concept like entitlement and rectificatory justice. Here, I'm not going in detail about this because it's an introductory concept class. However, the reason why you need to know all these differences is there are certain questions in the form of assertion reasoning and stuff like that. So in that case, you will have to probably know a little bit of details. For example, if you read Rawls, you know that he asked for, I mean, the entire purpose for making this, coming up with these two principles of fairness is to make sure that the institutions will emulate these principles and they follow it, and by following what happens, they can distribute some primary goods. Okay, so it has two elements. One is following procedures, which makes it procedural, and then it also distributes stuff. So in this way, so these are the things that nobody like directly says anywhere, but these are the things you could sort of come out of, like after reading your entire concept, you can come with certain conclusions that way, and the books I've recommended are pretty helpful for that. If I just quickly go to Indian politics, the two books that you must read is Indian Polity by Lakshmi Kant and Oxford Companion to Politics in India, which is written by Pratap Bhanu Mehta and Nija Gopal Jayal. Um, so in Indian politics, so the one here, the green book, you can it's a very big book, and like I said, reading political science for academics is different from reading it for entrances, unfortunately. And so that's why you should be reading just the first introduction of it. I mean, to those people who could not cover anything until now and they're just starting right now, it's better if you just go with reading the introduction given by Pratap Bhanu Mehta, where he gives us an overview of all the articles, and he says that, for example, Yogendra Yadav talked about politics of presence, and he said something about second democratic upsurge and stuff like that. Okay, so he gives an entire brief which is essential and also enough for a person appearing for master's entrances. Okay, but that's not to say that that is the end. Indian government so for Indian government and politics, you will have to also look at the DU portion, which DU Political Science Honors bachelor's portion. Go to it. Those people who are not in DU, just go and like look at the portion and see that the reference articles which are there under Indian Government and Politics section. Okay, so this is what I did. All of which I'm telling right now is something that I'm telling out of my own experience. I did not do political science in DU, but I went and I saw those. And in the reference articles, one said Nation and Its Fragments by Partha Chatterjee, which I randomly just memorized, and it helped me in solving a paper in a question. Okay, so you really, for somebody who do not have time to now go through a lot of things because of the constraints, you can just look at the articles names and also who wrote it. That will give you a brief idea. Okay, and also, some of my friends who were preparing then told me that they have also referred to Shubhra Ranjan's, Indian Government and Politics notes. So this person is somebody who used to teach in Vajiram, and she has this like brief introductory sort of notes for Indian government and politics. Okay, you might find it online. You can just check it out. It's not very in good detail, but it might be helpful for a few of you who are starting to prepare right now. So that's something I would recommend as well. And coming to Indian polity, it's a very big book, and it has so many details, and it's probably very exhausting for all of you to remember so many things. Okay, however, I should say that this is very basic book. It's something that all the political science students should be able to know. Having said that, I won't deny the fact that it's really difficult, because I myself faced a lot of problems in remembering all these details, which are not really necessary as well. But so for example, you might not be really, knowing how many people are there in NHRC, and who are being appointed, and like who will appoint them and stuff like that, right? So these are very minute details. So what I would suggest is you should at least read the portions that are very basic. For example, fundamental rights. That is something everybody should know. Which what is the Article 17? It talks about untouchabilities. So these are some issues that you've been reading from your 11th, 12th, or during your bachelor's. So those of you who are not from political science background, then you could just go and look at the kind of issues that are being read by honor student, political science honor student, and you just go with that syllabus and see that whether or not you're being able to understand the syllabus. And in that case, you are fulfilling your duty, which is you're reading the fullest. Okay. So there's like towards the end of the Indian polity book, there's a elaborate, pages which has amendments and all the acts and laws and stuff like that, articles, schedules, parts, which part is deals with which one and all that. So these are very basic, and you should be able to look at them once, glance, I mean give a glance at that, and also look at the political parties when they were formed, and you could also look at election commission, and there's so many commissions in the book towards the end. All that you need to remember is which commissions are statutory, which commissions are constitutional, which commissions are non-constitutional. Just make a difference between them, and like a list of them, and then like sort of memorize or whatever way you want to go about with it. And that's about Indian polity. Just make sure that you don't miss out the questions that anybody can do. So at least be thorough with the basic of basic concepts that everybody should know. Moving to comparative politics. So comparative politics, I refer to a book called J.C. Johari, which is here. You can see. And this comparative politics is very lengthy as well. There is this other book by Catherine McKinnon, if I'm not wrong, which is also very helpful. But it has like a lot of details and it's very technical. But Comparative Politics by J.C. Johari is very simple and something that you can prepare without worrying much about a lot of details. It will give you good understanding. But people who have time can go and check that other book out as well. And how to read comparative politics has been really difficult even for me. So I would say that when you're reading it, there are certain concepts that come up. Okay, for example, the example that I have given here in the slide is three waves of democratization, which Samuel P. Huntington gives us. So when you're reading this concept, what all you should look at is there's a concept and then who has given it, and then you have to look at what does it mean exactly, and then you can look at what all countries are being placed by him in these three waves. Okay, so you get an idea of everything. So you know that there are three, and you know what these waves are once you know what these waves of democratization means, and then you also know what all countries are there. So you basically know everything about it by only like dividing the concept into words, and just go about and look at those things. While they may not ask you what three waves of democratization is in the exam, it is helpful for you to understand concepts, like I said before, to answer the questions that come indirectly. Okay, so they might ask a true and false thing. Like they say that, they give you two statements and they'll be like, whether this assertion is right, or whether this reasoning is proper. So in those questions, I think that's for that basically you need a conceptual clarity. And then you need to know a little bit of which countries have a presidential system, semi-presidential, and parliamentary forms of government. Okay, if you read through this book, you'll find like one of the chapters deals exactly with that. Even if you don't, if you even if you can't remember all those details about what all councils are there in Switzerland, how many prime ministers are there, how many, yeah, so there's like seven people who will be doing the primary task, and one person on rotation basis will become the prime minister in Switzerland, etc. So even if you can't remember all that, just remember the kind of system that is there in Switzerland, for example. Switzerland is an example. It's not to say that that is only important. You could just look at other countries that were given here. And then approaches to studying is the first thing that you should be studying actually in comparative politics, but you don't have to stress a lot about it. There's not much to ask from these approaches because it's an MCQ type. But just look at it. How do we study the institutional historical systems? Okay, and if I come to systems and structural functional, these are the things that are very important more than the first four forms, which are considered as traditional. So you have to look at the behavioral systems, structural, functional, post-behavioral, these approaches, who gave it, what kind of books did they write, what is the difference between behavior and post-behavioral, how is systems different from structural and functional, okay? And this will just give you a conceptual clarity, and you need to remember those names of people who talked about all these issues. And then the most important thing in comparative politics, I feel, is to study the electoral and representative systems. So we know, I mean, there's a lot, many, like a variety of representative systems in across the world, and all of those you'll find in this book, very detailed. And you just need to know how these are different. For example, India follows a first past the post system, which is different from what Israel follows, which is the proportional system. So how are these things different? Why do they follow those? What are the advantages, and why did they have to choose only this? So these are some questions that naturally pop when you're reading, and try to find those answers out and make sure that you remember where which system is being followed. When we move to international relations, the three books that I read were Andrew Haywood, Global Politics, and Norman Lowe, Mastering Modern World History, and the Globalization of World Politics. Okay, and there's a specific reason why I made this Globalization of World Politics photo short, and the reason is for people studying only for political science, which is POLM. You don't really have to concentrate much on the third book. Just Andrew Haywood and Modern World History would do. But people must be generally preparing for PISM and IRAM, those who are writing for political science. In that case, you must definitely study the globalization of world politics. It's a must. You have to read that. And how do you read IR? So, like, what do you read in IR, first of all, is that you read international relations theory. We have three theories: realism, liberalism, Marxism, and then you have like approaches like constructivism, post-structuralism, feminism, and critical theory and all that. Okay, so you have to be able to have this hangover who all subscribe to which theory. Okay, and you should also be able to make a clear distinction when you're reading from what realism and neorealism are. Okay, or for example, neorealism and neoliberalism has too many similarities, and how are they different? Where did they actually differ? So these are the issues that you generally see in international relations theory, and a lot of questions in a question that was prepared in 2019 JNUEE. There, the question was who among the following is a neo-realist thinker, and one of the options was Kenneth Walls. So the questions in 2019 were that easy, but that doesn't mean it's going to be. I mean, it's going to be easy for all of us because only when the paper is easy, then a lot of competition is also going to be. So make sure that you read everything well. And the second part that you should be reading in IR is basically international organizations. So how you read international organizations is also important. First, for example, let me take EU as an example. So we have to first know the history of EU, because EU is such a special organization talked about widely. So you just need to go back to understanding how that European coal and steel committee has been formed, and from there how it has come to be called as EU in 1993, And then we saw like recently how Britain exited EU, and now how many members are there, how many used to be there. And then there is also this peculiar thing with EU. For example, a lot of European countries, I mean, a lot of countries who are part of European Union do not have euro as their currency. But there are countries who are not part of European Union and still have euro as their currency. So stuff like this, though this is what I just told is a very minute detail and is not probably very important for people attempting political science paper, but those who are also preparing for IRAM and PISM, you should be able to see all these smaller differences as well. And the other thing in IR is basically the issues that are generally sidelined when we studied in bachelor's. All of them you'll find in Andrew Haywood book, and so the contents which are there in Andrew Haywood, like society, nation, identity, culture, power, peace, poverty, environment, gender, international law, all these are generally not widely talked about. And also, like, there's so many questions that might come from these, and that's why Andrew Haywood is like a easier and also a comprehensive book that you could refer. And the fourth aspect is world history, which I asked you to read Norman Loewy, this blue color book. And yeah, so more than concentrating on, let's say, how many people died in World War, I think you should instead concentrate much on politics of Cold War. And you don't have to remember all numbers and details and everything, but try and have this understanding of what exactly happened when, and what all treaties were there, and let's say even the formation of United Nations and their bodies, and the kind of international system that was there, or for example even NAM, and so many other things that comes under world history, including the entirety of Cold War era is basically very important. But that's not to say that you should not go back and read World Wars. Do read it and have this basic understanding of, for example, who is part of the tripartite pact. Okay, so things like that, which are very basic. But yeah, well, most of questions do come from Cold War time anyway. And Baylis and Smith, like I said, is important. Like 1, 2 questions did come from that book last time, but mostly it's recommended for PISM and IRAM people. So while I think I've like thrown out like a lot of things here, I told that you should read that, these, and everything. But it's very understandable if you have a lot of confusion over how to read, how to make a judgment about what to read, because that's a question that I had when I was reading all these big books. I did not know how to really which one to really read, which one should I actually be concentrating on, because one person cannot remember everything that is there in all the books, right? So how do I go about it? So for that, we should review the papers, is what I feel. Okay, you need to analyze the papers that were already there, and that's the only way you could basically make into any institutions, and definitely also JNU. So here in the coming slides, just 2, 3 slides, I'm going to analyze just the IR portion from political science paper. Okay. So this is from NTA 2020, which is last year, which the paper which I gave. I called it NTA because that's a paper which was given by the NTA and not by JNU professors. Okay. So what I found is from that question paper, a lot of questions came from Andrew Haywood book. And I gave an example here, which is the question of, this is the question, I'm reading it out. Who elucidated international society theory as a combination of 3 schools of thought: realism, rationalism, and revolutionism? Okay, and there are 4 options here, and the answer is Martin White. Okay, and this is a line that they exactly picked up from the Andrew Haywood book. Okay, so that way it's clear that a lot of questions here are coming. Like I found that half the questions in this paper were from Andrew Haywood. Okay, and a lot of relation is there between the NTA paper that we got in 2020 and the DU papers that were there. Okay, so I would like suggest you guys to go back and also look at DU papers, because that's going to give you more confidence in order to like sort of answer the questions that might come in various ways. Sometimes also not very related to getting into JNU, because most questions do not seem like political science questions only, but for the sake of getting into JNU, you have to, if the paper is set this way, you have to be able to read all those details. And if I continue from that very same question paper, one of the questions that I found is from current affairs. Okay, and that is written here, which is Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement was officially endorsed in 2010 between India and which country? The answer is South Korea, and such though it is not very current, they asked about 2010, but it comes under something that generally political science students do not really read in their classrooms. It's something that people will have to know by reading, current affairs somewhere else. So I heard that my friends have read current affairs from Vision IAS, but you could also look at the Hindu. They give monthly current affairs. But I would say you don't have to concentrate on current affairs at all, because I did not, and I could still get into JNU. So I'm just telling that if you don't have time, if you have time, you are very very much welcome to do that. But if you don't have time, it's totally all right. Not many questions come. I just found one question from current affairs in the entirety of political science paper. So there is also one question from Baylis and Smith, which is about putting the women's movements conferences in order. Okay, and that's just one question that came, but a lot of questions from Baylis and Smith were directly asked in PISM and IRAM. Okay, and then I was told that a lot of friends of mine who solved NTA UGC NET political science papers. So there, from there, at least 20% of IR questions came from this. Okay, since I'm only analyzing IR here, but generally also a lot of questions did come from UGC NET political science papers. But those are very there's so many papers available online, and it might be time consuming for those who are starting to read right now or have started very recently. I did not solve the question papers myself, and no matter how much you solve, nobody can really answer the kind of question that came from the paper. For example, the one that is here is, who said for the folly of just one man may spell disaster for whole nation? I mean, it's least likely that anybody who solved the UGC NET papers might have remembered this. And the answer is Jimmy Carter, some US president. Okay. So you could, however, go and check political science UGC NET papers as well. And quite on the contrary, is the question paper that came in 2019, and I called it JNU paper because the paper was prepared by the JNU professors themselves. And since they do know what kind of students they want, and so they clearly gave a very basic and a good paper, which did not really ask all the details about when which party formed when and stuff like that. Those things are not really important for a political science student. You need to be a little more argumentative and think beyond the box and stuff like that. So for that, they just looked at whether or not you have basic conceptual understanding. Okay, and that's why there is almost less to no current affairs, and you have questions of theory and organizations or anything that is related to political science in which is like very small. Like I think I told you the question that came, which is, who among the following is a who subscribes to neorealism, which is very basic. Anybody who would read IR for the first time also would remember that it is Kenneth Waltz. Okay, so such questions did come, but reading the books that I have recommended you would help you in gaining this conceptual clarity. If it's likely that the professors are setting the question paper this time, I'm not really sure, but do prepare for the worst, which is the 2020 paper. Look at it, and also look at the question papers from DU, because all of these are on same lines. Prepare for the worst. If it is going to be a 2019 kind of a paper, then you are lucky. But if it's not, why do you have to take a chance? So just look at the 2020 paper and look at that as a model to you studying and going forward with your preparation. And like I said, though 2019 paper is not very difficult compared to 2020, that itself becomes a hurdle for a lot of people, because a lot of my friends who could get the cutoff mark also did not get into JNU, and the reason was the number of seats is limited, so they'll have to like pick according to whatever you know scale they have and something like that. So make sure that you're not negligent during the exam as well. So I'll just go to the last but one slide of mine, which is giving you just general tips, just flowing from all the things that I have just told. I feel that the key to success is only solving question papers. Okay, the more you solve, the better, because you get a hang of how to solve a number of questions that are from various fields. Okay, it's not just questions from political theory or Indian political thought. A mixture of things will happen, and you should be able to do all of this within 3 hours of time, right? So time won't be an issue to anybody, because you either know the answer or you don't know. Okay, but it's important that you put enough of your concentration on solving the paper, because what I felt from my experience of writing these JNU and other university entrance examinations as well is that our preparation does not end before the examination. You have to keep on struggling even during the examination. Try and find, because there's so much of information in political science. People could ask you anything at all, and you might not have read it. But it doesn't mean that you just simply leave the answer and come. And also, luckily, you don't have negative marking. So you could think, you could make connections between whether this is right or not, and just use your conceptual understanding that you are gaining after reading all these books, and make sure that you make all the linkages and then answer. All right, so that's why I think solving the question papers back at home will also help you in help you in developing that capacity of making sure that you do that answering in a more easy way. And yeah, and if you score less, it's likely that people would just leave. They don't like want to solve the question papers, because they might feel a little discouraged, and they'll think that I should not feel discouraged, and that's why I'm not going to solve these papers. Please don't do that. If you score less, I'll ask you to solve more. Okay, because the first time that I solved, I barely put 20 correct, and that too a lot of them were lucky, just like I just did it. But the last time I did, I got like 85, and that was which is my exam. So that's a lot of improvement that comes only after you solve a lot of question papers. It doesn't happen like that, just like that. Okay. And also, I'd ask you to read carefully all the books that I've said. So once you solve the question papers, you'll get an understanding of how you should be reading. Okay. Once you do get that understanding, go and read about. I mean, read in a way that you should be able to solve these questions. Okay. So the one question that I've put here, which is from Baylis and Smith, which is put the women's movement conferences in correct order. You have to make sure that if you're reading something, do read it carefully. Okay, don't just like leave it, because you don't want to regret later that despite you reading that book, you could not answer something from there. So just make sure that whatever you're reading, you don't have to read a lot, but just read some, but read them thoroughly is what I'm just telling. Okay, and make some very short notes and go over the notes over the weekend, which I did. For example, if um, I started my preparation like 2 months, 3 months ago, 3 months from the examination date, and when I read like comparative politics book completely and made notes, I used to read the notes on weekends. And if I then started reading international relations and then made notes for it, I used to read the next weekend both comparative politics notes and also international relations notes. So that way I sort of repeated everything, and that sort of gave me like I did not waste a lot of time in thinking about things that I already know in the during the exam time. That made things very easier for me. So just repeat the things that you already read, no matter how less or how more have you read. Okay, though this is a really bad thing. I mean, like memorizing this stuff will not make you a really good political scientist. But if you have to like get into JNU, I think this is something that you ought to do now, unfortunately. And yeah, well, I would just tell that look at this thing as a process of learning, because I never thought that I would get into JNU. I thought I was only writing for DU because there are many seats over there. I thought I'd at least get 300th rank over there, and still managed to get there. But I just looked at the entire process as just I just want to learn more, and that was the only thing I had in mind. I did not really bother myself with whether or not I'll get there or not. So and probably that's one of the reasons why I got into JNU. So don't take too much stress, and even if you don't get into JNU or any other institution, it doesn't mean the end of the world. So just chill and try to learn more. Thank you.